I'm delighted to be here amongst you all. The brief given to me was essentially to talk about, keep the focus a lot more, on the mobile landscape, as it were. And I think what I'd like to do is just, set the context and perhaps touch upon 5 or 6 key elements within this, and then leave it to you all, to query, to question. I'm not so sure, Abhishek, if I have all the answers, but I will certainly give it a shot here. So the first things first, I always believe, as marketeers, as professionals in media and advertising, if we can sort of put a sense of size, scale, put the basic data and numbers out there, it always makes for a far more engaging conversation. So the Indian story, as far as mobile is concerned, is really, an unprecedented kind of a story. The first 10 years, this industry was nothing but a poster boy of the entire Indian economy. The last 3 or 4 years, of course, it's gone from being poster boy to butcher boy, as it were. A scenario from 7 to 14 carriers, hyper-competitive environments. But the basic fundamentals are the fact that this device has been game-changing and will continue to be so for the next 5 years. So from number perspective, when you look at it, today, there are already about 200 million people in the country who are accessing the internet. And, telecom companies are adding now between 6 and 7 million new consumers a month who are getting onto the internet. And this data is very interesting, given that we sell about 220 million devices a year. Of that, now, somewhere in the range of about 140, 150 million devices are what you call as internet-capable devices. These are predominantly what we describe as the smart feature phones and the smartphones. And roughly about 70% of these, which is roughly about 40% of that total base, is getting activated. And our belief is over the next 4 years, this number will grow from about 200 million to closer to 600 million people. Now, if I just draw a context to a neighbor of ours up north, China. China 6 years back had roughly about 70 million internet users. Today, it's closer to about 550 million. What China didn't necessarily have 6 years back, was this entire proliferation of other connected devices. It was in a similar phase. It had just about embarked on 3G. 4G was still elusive to them. But basic part of their growth was happening from, PC moving to mobility, as it were. In the Indian context, whilst that will continue to be a big driver, what you're also seeing is the fact that almost every form of device is becoming connected. And that's one of the reasons why I feel we will see a 300% growth over the next 3.5 years as far as consumers are concerned. Now, my entire thing on this medium is that at one level, the medium is extremely personal and hence sort of doesn't necessarily augur to that kind of communication which most of us as marketeers are perhaps familiar with. The other big trends on mobility really are stemming from the capability of the device and what it can do. So apart from communication, one of the big drivers for some of the major companies, for example, when we see, you go back to Facebook 3 or 4, 5 years back, the biggest driver for them was really the aspect of photo sharing. In recent times, as we are witnessing the consumption of video online, the Indian market is not being left behind in the same process. And therefore, I think photos and video have the ability to becoming, almost like the new text, as it were, and the new medium for engagement with not just the sort of, digital consumers as such, but even the wider width of, if you go from 2 to 80. And there are always little anecdotes which best describe some of these things. And I'm reminded of 2 instances. One is a niece of mine who was 18 months old, and she just about learned how to walk. And one fine day in the living room, she gets up and touches the television, and what does she do with the television? She pinches it, like this. She pinches it. Now, obviously, this kid had grown up on her mother's iPad to, check out, all those little things that you would do and for her, that touch. So when I saw this, and this was about 2.5 years back, I actually put out like a little album, and I kind of gave her a whole bunch of photographs to play around with. And I think in that context, Indian marketeers have not necessarily begun to grasp the bigness of what photography and the different technologies centered around that, whether it's GIF animations and areas like that, and certainly the interactivity of video and what can be built around that. So that's another component which has strong roots to mobility and will only continue to grow, because in a market like ours, last year we sold about 50 million smartphones. As I mentioned, another about 50 million were smart feature phones capable of video, and video becomes a very interesting way of how you sort of take this forward. I don't want to bring about conversations on digital and mobile from a very geeky perspective. We tend to get very carried away, and we tend to start talking about all the cool things that are happening. And I'm conscious of the fact that the Indian market is a market which, for a $1.8, $1.9 trillion economy, we are barely a $6.5 billion advertising economy. And within that, when you look at digital this year would probably be about 600 million or thereabouts. So hugely under-advertised, economy as such. And therefore, I'm all for, what will actually work for brands and making it as basic and as real as it were. And in that context, I think an area which has been very, very sort of underexploited or even underdiscovered perhaps is really the space of voice, just IVR. There are some very interesting examples in that area of what brands are beginning to do. We ourselves did a program, we've done a whole bunch of them, but one of them which comes to mind is something that we did in collaboration with Radio Mirchi, etc., for Unilever, where brands are looking at interactive voice platforms as a means to building, curating, and actually sustaining communities. And they're doing so for a very basic reason. Today, there is a little over 800 million people in India who have access to mobile phones. All of them have access to voice as a form factor. And it is now reaching areas where even television reach is restricted. So it's in that sense, I wouldn't call it traditional or new media or whatever. I mean, you start looking at mobile as main media. And I think, there's a lot of innovation that can be built around that. So again, in the conversations that we will have, if you all want me to highlight this a little bit more, I'm happy to do that. I'll just talk about, two other smaller elements where I think 2014 will be a breakout year, at least in the Indian context. Globally, it's happened. But by 2015, it'll become a bigger trend as such. And that's really the aspect of gaming and gamification for brands. Again, some very, very interesting examples of what we are already beginning to see, how we are building in brands into games, how we're taking the whole concept of gamification, which is, really gamifying experiences with the intention of heightened engagement and the intention of making consumers feel gratified for the loyalty in terms of time or actions that they do, in areas. And gaming as a form factor, beyond music, which is about 90% of the community on mobile uses their phone for some form of music, video, gaming is like, one of those bigger ones as well, which is continuing to grow. And obviously, all of this is happening with social media, etc., being there as well. So, these were some of the thoughts. If we have time, I would also like to touch upon with you all perhaps how we are moving from the whole communicate to an interact economy, which is, if you go back 5 years, it was largely the internet was about email, etc. The last 5 years have been a lot more about social, and which is the interact kind of ecosystem. And I think the next 5 years from here will lead to what we describe as the transaction economy. I think it's very, very interesting, because if I take the aspect of brands being media, for those brands who experiment, who play around with this, they have an ability to cajole, curate, sort of build those communities, arouse interest in conversations, and thereby even lead them to transaction. And the Indian market, I think the e-commerce story is a big one, which is yet to play out, largely driven by the fact that if you see, even in very, very evolved kind of product categories, not more than 25% of our retail is in the organized sector. And therefore, there is a huge opportunity as you sort of, e-commerce enabled or m-commerce enable your businesses. Because the last 10, 15 years have also seen retail and realty prices, make a lot of businesses be unviable as far as retail. And that's again an area where the value conscious kind of community that we are as Indians plays and augurs very well as far as digital medium is concerned from a transaction economy. So these were, my 5, 6 kind of bullet points into why I feel very, very optimistic and encouraged to encourage brands and companies to look at their businesses and not just from a perspective of communication, but to start looking at it as to how they can move it to a transaction economy and really, really bring about greater efficiencies into their business on the back of that. So, these are just some of my opening thoughts. Pradyumna, over to you and your team.
Neeraj, I had a question for you. Clearly, mobile as a media vehicle is going to be the largest across genres, in terms of whether you compare with television, whether you compare with print and whatever else. Are you, is the domain really getting its due from the world at large, from advertisers, from government, and everybody else?
I think what's that, because even when it comes to television, or even when it comes to in a lot of the mature markets, print is on the decline, but we're one of those markets, where even that has been growing, is the fact that connectivity across these media. So you would be well aware, like already in America, if people are watching TV, because it's already become a dual screen, 3-screen kind of scenario, because when you're watching, you still have your phone or tablet with you. So what you're watching, you are searching for on your mobile or on your tablet, and therefore linkages are getting established.
Right.
So I'm a firm believer. I've seen this for quite some time, and we tend to get carried away as proponents of whichever business or industry that we are, that this is it and rest of it will not. So, but a term which we've all used and more often than abused, convergence, is today truly beginning to sort of take place. So I think in that context, it's there. Why I also feel the mobile medium and the people who are involved in mobile advertising also need to be conscious of this. The fact that today yields on mobile are already 1/5 that of the internet. There is about a little over 100 million people who are just using internet through mobile devices. And the next 3-4 years in India alone, it will be about 400-500 million, as I spoke about. So yields are going to keep coming down. Now, it's not about what you can do out of a business in terms of communication and using it as a media, but it's the fact that that medium has a lot more capability to it. It's coming with processors which have an ability to give you an augmented reality experience on the screen. It's coming, it's a connected device, it may have smart cloud associated with it, so you may want to try something on your phone, go back and experience it. And I think there is a need to creating slightly more integrated, wholesome kind of experiences. So I'm sorry, it's a longish answer, but I wanted to lay the facts right up front that I'm not, here to sort of run down a particular medium or something like that, but also at the same time to build a realism into it. I don't think the government can do much in this area. It's what one would really do is to encourage brands to experiment. The cost of experimenting on digital media is very, very low right now. And the more you experiment, the more you are better prepared for your brand and your consumers in terms of what you can do.
Neeraj, I completely agree with you. I think the way mobile is placed, it's I think in a very terrific place, and the way the market is getting traction. We actually, as marketers, we really don't know what the opportunities that are there. And I think the biggest challenge for all of us when we talk to our customers is that we have no clue on what's the real number. So you said 100 million, somebody says 200 million, somebody says 50 million, and one is not able to really slice and dice to understand what is the profile of this person. So I know there is handset targeting feature and there is other targeting features. What it's really lacking is some kind of an organized syndicate body, perhaps, to really take it forward. I know there is a mobile marketing association, but I don't think they are too worried about what's happening in India. Is there a platform which can actually drive the cause of mobile? I think it really deserves one.
No, you're very right, Satish, that for any medium for it to get its due recognition and thereafter get scale towards it, there are certain basics which need to get established. See, the numbers that one talks about, I mean, there are bodies. There is a body called the Internet and Mobile Association of India. It is de facto sort of body, has I think over 250 members. All the major companies, which are the stakeholders in the broader digital ecosystem, are members of this. It's been around now for closer to about 14 years or so, and they do routine, surveys and they disseminate data. As marketers, we know, for example, storytelling. Storytelling has been, a big trend the last couple of years, and the digital medium has kind of taken storytelling to a whole different realm altogether. I'd love to get some of your thoughts on how brands and content. That's a very big, conversation about content marketing. How you sort of build communities, and in all of these, the mobile medium has actually been at the forefront. Like I said, I mean, if we ourselves experienced 225 million people who transacted to actually pick up 2 billion units of content, I think it's a huge opportunity for brands to access into to build it upon. So those are some of the thoughts.
Neeraj, my question is, how are organizations reducing digital risk on ongoing basis? Like we have seen incidents like Guitar on United Airlines, and keeping this in mind, I feel every organization must begin their digital journey to address at least the risk.
Absolutely. So see, there are some basic things that now, I mean, technically almost all the major companies and brands are doing. In fact, it's percolating down into little retail organizations and SMEs and all also, which is, there are simple tools which are available by which you can actually monitor the conversations about your company, your competitors, your sub-brands, the areas that you've got, and hopefully be able to redeem that. And there are far too many examples of the risks that you have in case you're not listening to your consumers. And the thing about any of these things is that whilst there are opportunities, at the same time it's a double-edged sword. Any new medium is always filled with its own complexities, as it were. And I think social media has been, for many brands, an absolute nightmare if you've not been prepared for it, wherein you've been caught, whether it's to do with your service standards, whether it's to do with the way you've engaged, or it's as simple things as your response times, as it were. So I think that level of elementary things are being done. For the more evolved kind of companies, particularly as you move into financial transaction economy, or you move into the financial sector, etc., they have other challenges. So we are working very closely with a forum which is the it's NPCI, National Payment Corporation of India, and they've formulated something called as IMPS, which is the charter of the Reserve Bank to try and use mobile as a means to banking to the unbanked. Now, when you look at the Indian market, we're about 1.25 billion people, but we have only 290 million, bank accounts in the country. And when you vary that to about 800 million potentially unique, or 750 million unique consumers, there may be a billion SIMs, but unique consumers in mobiles about maybe 750 million. There is a huge opportunity of what we can do as far as sort of banking to the unbanked, as it were. And one of the charters of the government is to try and enable that. Now, whilst that's the case, it also comes with its own set of challenges. And there are regulatory environments which you have to sort of cover as you move forward. So I think companies, this is an area, as you keep moving up the evolution and adoption cycle, the aspects of risks associated with digital, in whichever form it may be, come hand in hand with the broader width and reach that you end up giving as far as engaging with consumers. And just remember this one simple thing. Brands have the opportunity of becoming media when it comes to digital. I think that one sentence really lights up the possibilities of what it can. And when you start seeing yourself like that, then you kind of prepare yourself a lot more, and there is this sense of being in a glass house, as it were, to take that forward.
Hi, Neeraj. The question that I had was that what are the common mistakes that brands do when dwelling into mobile marketing or advertising?
Okay, so see, basically, one of the most common things is trying to apply the same measurement yardsticks that you do for other medium on which you are familiar with. The other component is at times having too much of an expectation on that medium itself. And I must say, if I look at the mobile advertising related revenues that have emerged out of the market, my sense is last year it would have been a very small amount, maybe just 250-300 crores or so in total, maybe a little bit more, maybe about actually probably closer to about 400 crores. A lot of this communication has largely happened not so much by brands, but it's happened by e-commerce companies, it's happened by entities which are into digital goods, etc. Brands are now beginning to, because first of all, what happens is when you see that little screen, you tend to feel, acha nahi, that commercial, how will it play, or this, how it will do. What you have to start appreciating is that 9 alphabet hashtag has potentially greater power for what it can do for your brand than necessarily a 30-second commercial on that specific medium of sorts. So I think many a times, and I think it's the responsibility as much of the agencies, of the companies, the publishers who are working to try and bring those brands and people up the curve to make them better appreciate the medium in terms of what it can do. So the example which Pradyuman gave about Unilever is an interesting one. It's something in which we actually ended up just enabling content to them, but it was an initiative of Levers. It was done by in partnership with Mirchi, and they talked about that for Bihar as a market, I think reach of television was about 37-38%, whereas when they did their research, they found that mobile was already reaching about 60+%. So they ended up building a voice-based radio network. We enabled content, etc., for it, and it was interspaced with. So it was like a conventional radio channel, but interspaced with a lot of clever messaging, pertaining to the brands itself that they had. And since it was a pull medium, alongside, you kept on bringing in a push element as consumers were being engaged in the real world. You ended up keeping on growing that community in its form. So I think that's been a very, very clever. In fact, I believe this won the GSM award in Barcelona last week, which is what Pradyuman was referring to.
Tell me, Neeraj, I've always, as a content person, as somebody who's been in the news, the last time I worked, we tried doing something like piping in content through mobile phones. People were more interested in shairi than news. Do you think? Of course, things have changed with smartphones, piping in live news with videos. Do you think the access for news and current affairs will increase with this entire smartphone boom that we have seen?
So, see, the answer is an absolute yes, except that it's not going to be naturally in the same format that the consumer has been consuming it, either in the print form or on the television, as it were, or on radio. So examples that I can throw up, and I think examples always help in just kind of, making us see things in a certain way. I love like what NDTV is trying to do with this whole concept called the second screen, wherein it's, they may be having a show, but when you light up that app, there will be a whole separate parallel track, which is an interactive track of the main show that's going on, including, actual real questions whilst the show is live, as an example. The other aspect of consumption of content on the rise is, see, consumption of content broadly on digital is on a geometric rise year on year. If I were to just throw some basic data to you on, say things like the surge of photos, for example. So photos, to give you an idea, in 2009, there was roughly about 50 million sort of photographs which were being shared per day, and by the end of 2013, this number had gone up to something like 800 million per day. It's a similar story when it comes to video as a consumption factor as well. I mean, we've seen services which have ramped up to such a level. So it's coming back to your question, is there, I think the more moot question is, with so much of content out there, are consumers willing to pay for that content, as opposed to it being available in whichever form? I'm sure each of us know enough number of people, particularly what we call as the screenagers, those who are just living their lives in different screens, as it were, where they get their news predominantly out of the social feeds that they have subscribed into. So they will be in a Vine app, they'll certainly be on Twitter, etc. in terms of, so they have their own way of bringing about. So if you see the new app which is being done by Facebook, it's not being launched in India, it's called Paper. And the entire experience is built around that you can select what are the tracks you want to follow. So if you want to follow, technology or creative art forms or sport or business, apart from your core feed, which is that of your friends, you will get curated content across each of these, and hence consumption of content in any manner when you look at it is on the rise. What happens in the mobile economy is very interesting, and particularly in India. My belief is that the more we are dependent on advertising as a means to monetization, I think the Indian market is in a very dangerous position. We've seen it for far too many categories. Today, the entire broadcast sector is not more than $3 billion, even though there's like about 260 million households. There are about 60 million DTH set-top boxes. But our over-dependence on advertising as opposed to subscription is really what has been the pain point. The mobile economy, on the other hand, is what we call as a micro-transaction economy. People don't mind paying you 10 paisa, 50 paisa, 1 rupee, as long as they get what they want and they have an option of in and out. So one of the trends internationally is that of digital goods and subscriptions. And brands are choosing, because brands may not want to charge their consumers for the content, but they recognize that people are spending. Like last year, there's a little over $110 billion globally which was spent on digital goods. I mean, of which gaming itself was about 35 billion or so. So now brands are saying that the broader, advertising economy, rest of the world is about $1 trillion. Can I start taking parts of this in return for the community that we get, and we will either subsidize that or actually offer it for free? But that's a bigger trend which more and more brands are beginning to experience and see around.
Neeraj, so more and more companies I believe I hear are going mobile first. So what do you think? Do they have an advantage when compared to internet-based businesses transitioning to mobile space?
Yes, I think that's a very valid question, Abhishek, and it's something that we certainly are. A lot of companies. I remember Eric Schmidt about 3 years back in Barcelona saying that Google as an organization became mobile first, and there's a reason for that. That screen has now become the predominant screen which is with consumers the maximum number of time. With each passing quarter, it's a connected screen, and therefore it's getting more and more enriched. And we are beginning to see, evolution as far as touch and quality of display and quad-core processing. And the same things we saw in the computing world in the 1990s is coming into mobility. So keeping all that in mind, all those companies who start looking at mobile first, because we believe we have a great shot next generation of like Gopal or a major company, but knowledge, information, is driven more and more on that. I'll give you another interesting anecdote, not totally related. I was talking to one of our clients about 5-6 years back in the automobile sector. He had a very, very valid observation. He said, when they had launched a previous version of their vehicle, which was 2 years prior to what they did, say, 4 years back, there was a big difference in the consumers predominantly. He felt that they needed to retrain their staff because consumers were walking into dealerships far more evolved with a lot more information than sometimes, their own managers on the shop floor itself. And the reason for that was that people were not buying cars, they were not buying automobiles on, but they were researching it. They were suddenly a lot more aware about, pistons and newer technologies and so I think the fact that mobile will be the definitive medium for people to get onto the internet itself qualifies for people to be strongly focused in that area as such.
Thanks, Neeraj. On another macro level, I believe scenario. So there's large investments, which keep flowing onto the digital space, but hardly anyone is making any, they're profitable. So do you think there is a bubble like the .com era? Are we, probably on the right path? Your views on this?
Sure. So let me respond to you. See. The Indian market, when you look at it, I want to draw one parallel for you first on a market which I talked about earlier, which is our neighbors up north, China. China, Abhishek, now, the broader mobile and mobile internet digital ecosystem is today valued at something like about $750 billion. There are just 3 companies in China today which are worth $400 billion in aggregate value. I mean, I don't know how many of you have heard of a company called Tencent as an example. It's predominantly a company which is into digital goods, virtual, and messaging, the WeChat people. Now, this is a company which, if you were to Google them right now, it has an enterprise value of about $145 billion. It's a real, entity and business and whatever. When you compare this to the Indian market, with perhaps the exception of maybe Just Dial, which is more a physical company and transforming into a digital company, there isn't a single billion-dollar enterprise out of India right now. In the same analogy, you would look at dozens of these companies into very, very niche segments who have gone about building. In the Indian market, when you look at it in context terms, there is perhaps, give or take, maybe a couple $100 million, maybe about $1.5 billion or so, which has come in the last, say, 3 or 4 years. A big portion of this has gone into e-commerce businesses. And obviously, we are all aware all of these e-commerce businesses continue to be loss-making. But the benchmark of e-commerce businesses, which is the epitome of all of this, is really Amazon. So again, an interesting little anecdote here for you. So if you Google Amazon and it's a company which I think has a market cap about 165, 170 billion or thereabouts. Now it trades at a P multiple of 690. At a 690 P multiple, Walmart, which has a market cap of 250 billion and trades at about 13 or 14 P multiple. If Walmart were to be traded at the same P multiple as Amazon, it would be a $18 trillion company in a $15 trillion American market. The total GDP of that market is 15 trillion. Now, the reason that the market is so forgiving towards some of these companies and businesses is because of the potential of disruption which continues to exist. Even if you see any of the verticals, you look at the vertical of travel. In the last 4 or 5 years, the vertical of travel and real-time bidding, real-time, this whole concept of last-minute booking, whatever, that itself has opened up a whole different business for this entire space of what we call as, and hotels, airline seats. These are very perishable commodities. So the amazing thing about digital is of what it can do. I mean, if you see, even for me, who's somebody who's been in this business 15 years, even I was like wowed. And the moment, it took me 30 seconds to be wowed. After that, I said, hell, I mean, this is so logical. Why not? And this is the comment which was made by, Jeff Bezos about 3 months back when he said, we are going to use droids to deliver goods. Now, when you think about it, it seems geeky initially, but once you put a GPS coordinate on a droid. Already what droids are doing to photography, etc., is like path breaking. You put a little GPS coordinate to it, it'll deliver. Yeah? It'll deliver to exactly the very window that you want it to be delivered into. Yeah. So when you think of it like that, some of these things are not so overwhelming, and the quantum of investment which has gone into this medium, we read it and we feel, because these are startups and whatever that happen, but I still feel it's nothing in comparison to what it should be. There should be a lot more investment, there should be a lot more of innovation which should be driven. And the best example, as I keep saying, is just look at China. And I mean, China has actually ended up creating $1 trillion economy on the back of one thing. They kept Google out. As simple as that. I mean, on the back of that, that's the kind of business which has been created. So, I mean, just to put in perspective, one of our largest private sector companies in this market is Reliance Industries. Now, Reliance Industries has a market cap of 45 billion, as opposed to a messaging company, in China, which has a market cap of 145 billion. I just want to touch upon for a minute on two other things which people should perhaps look at in their own form, and particularly for the benefit of marketers as such. See, one is you are beginning to see into retail outlets itself this entire aspect of what we call as the element of there's one aspect which is called relevant retail, and the other is how augmented reality is bringing retail establishments alive. So people are now beginning to walk into stores. Again, they're doing it on e-commerce sites where you just put. Those of you who've seen the commercial of this company called Lenskart, you just put your photograph there and you can check 100 shades and figure out which one, and deliver it to you. The other aspect is really this thing of try and buy is a big thing on the digital medium, again with digital goods, and I think brands would do well by way of giving little mini experiences, samples of their products and services in order to cajole consumers into this. And these are, I just feel, very relevant from the Indian context, so that's why I just wanted to highlight that.
Thanks everyone. Thanks, Neeraj. I think it was a very informative session. And like usual, we'll be back the next month of Thursday, and hope to see you guys again. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks a lot, guys, and wish you all the very best. And thank you. Lovely to be here with the IAA Hangout.